Welcome to episode 15 of the Alcon Maddox War Plan webinar series. I'm Richard Ritchie. Today I'm excited to be joined by Heba Sayed, who is the strategy leader for Cloud and AI business unit of IBM Middle East. Say hello to everyone, Heba.
Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining today.
Excellent, good to have you, Heba. Look, for those of you who don't already know me, as I said, my name is Richard Ritchie. I run a niche recruitment and executive search firm based here in the UAE, and our primary focus is specialised in sourcing sales and commercial leadership talent for the IT channel industry. Now, typical roles that we work on include channel and partnership management roles, head of sales, director of sales, VP of sales, country manager and GM, for example. Now, I've spent the last 25 years building and leading high-performing sales teams. And I know just how important it is to install the right commercial leader within an organization. This not only has a direct impact on how quickly you can penetrate the market, but also how well you can protect revenues in times of crisis like today. Now, over the past few months, we've helped a number of organizations recruit sales leaders remotely to open new channels in the Middle East and in Singapore. So if any of you on the call today would like to gain insight into our talent targeting system and how we're able to help clients identify the top 15% of passive candidates in the market, just type talent in the chat box, and what I'll do is I'll reach out to you after today's session for a private conversation to take that forward. Now, that said, today's not about recruitment, nor is it about me. It's actually about you, and I'm specifically now talking to business managers within the IT channel industry. Over the past few months, I've spoken to many of you on the call today, just to get a better sense of what's happening in the market, just to get a better sense of your top of mind challenges in this time of COVID-19. And some of you have already become part of the mastermind community that we've created in order to tackle this crisis head on. Now, these top of mind challenges are really what's been driving the content of this webinar series. And it's really, this webinar series for me is really my way of giving back to the community, but then also in an attempt to bring us closer together so we can look to get through this hard time and emerge from it a lot stronger than when we first entered, should we say. Now, over the past 4 months, as many of you know, we've covered a whole host of topics already, examples being fast-tracking digital transformation, managing a partner ecosystem during a crisis, switching from CapEx to OpEx with cloud computing, and a couple of weeks ago we covered how does a distributor remain relevant. Each week we bring in different industry experts to help piece together strategies to overcome these very real challenges, and this week is no different. At the end of the series, we'll be compiling a white paper. This will hopefully be ready towards the end of September. So if you'd like to receive a copy of the white paper, just stay to the end of today's session. I'll give you information on how you can obtain a copy. So that said, like I said, today we have with us Heba Sayed from IBM. Heba's going to help us walk through or really better understand the challenge, first of all, that has been articulated to be by many business owners, i.e. how to safeguard revenues and how to activate an existing client base. But before we dive into that, Heba, why don't you just give us a little bit of background about yourself, who you are, what you do, just for the people who haven't yet met you.
Sure, thanks, Richard. So my name is Heba Sayed. I'm currently leading strategy for Cloud and Cognitive Solutions Unit at IBM Middle East and Africa for the past few months. And I have 15 years of experience in marketing in the IT industry in Egypt, my home country, and here in the UAE, working mainly for IBM in a number of roles. I did hardware marketing, software marketing, channel marketing. So done a bit of roles in the marketing leadership, and just recently took on a strategy role to understand more about the business from a holistic point of view and a bit of a bird view from outside marketing as well. I have 2 children and proud mother, so today is the first or second day of e-learning on e-school. So yeah, interesting times professionally and personally, and I'm sure everyone today as well is going through the same. And I think it's good to have discussions and chats like this to understand best practices and really brainstorm. And I think it's really the power of community, Richard, that you're bringing together, because there's no one right answer. It's a big challenge, and there's no one answer. And I'm sure every company, every industry, and every business that's successful, and if you have a business that's up and running today, 6 months after the pandemic hit, that means you're doing something right. It's simple as that, right? And you see much bigger businesses, whether in technology, B2B, B2C, that are not able to survive. And I think it says a lot about a business if it's able to go through, even through with the challenges. And I think it's all about, the collective that you said, the community, and bringing people together to understand best practices and how we can all continue and survive and maybe even thrive in this challenge.
Definitely. It's an interesting point you made about strategy, which I'll come to in just a second. So guys on the call, just I forgot to mention at the top of the call, if you have any questions at any time, please don't worry about saving them to the end. Just jump right in, okay? Just add them to the chat box and I'll happily read them out. Similarly, if you have an insight from anything Heba or myself has said, just type capital I followed by the insight. And again, I'll happily read that out to encourage more participation in the sessions we go forward, okay? Just coming back to the point Heba you mentioned about strategy, it's really interesting because in the conversations I've had with business leaders over the last few months, there have been, this talk of strategy. The initial, if you like, mindset at the beginning of the pandemic for many companies was very much let's wait and see. Well, it was said to me a few months ago from someone I was talking to in Silicon Valley. Actually, they said hope is not a strategy. And I think more and more companies are now realizing, right, that they need perhaps to change things or at least decide on a different direction. And there are many different things that companies are considering. The original or the initial perhaps interpretation of, okay, everyone looking forward for the post-COVID-19 world. I think more and more companies have come around to the realization that really there's no such thing as the post-COVID-19 world. There's pre-COVID and now there is COVID. And we already understand perhaps how our workspaces and behaviors have to be realigned. So people are now starting to make the changes in order to continue to move forward. But on the strategy point, I think what's really important is as things change, there needs to be a question of what is changing and why, right? And I think with this point has come up again and again in conversations I've had with business leaders. They talk about the need to get closer to their customer. But no one's really given any insight into, okay, how do we do that? What does that mean, getting closer? Does that just mean having more conversations? What is the depth of those conversations? So in our discussion a couple of days ago, you mentioned 3, if you like, overriding strategies to tackle this idea of, okay, from a business development point of view, if that's dwindling, and we recognize that a lot of our revenue now is going to come from our existing client base, how do we activate that client base? And the 3 strategies you wanted to walk through today were, 1, surveying the external landscape and getting closer to your client, which we'll come to in a moment. The second would be to assess the internal strategies and our value perception. And then the third would be to update marketing tactics to accommodate smaller budgets. So let's take the first one first, which makes sense. So talk to me more about the idea of surveying the external landscape to get closer to your clients. What does that mean to you?
So let me take one step back, Richard, and talk about strategy. So I think what COVID has brought along is mainly the need to accelerate and do many of the changes that should have been done in many businesses a long time ago. So if you think just outside the customer relationship, if you think about remote work, enabling remote work, reimagining the work day, this in my view, and I always talked about this before, right? Who said, humans need to work 9 to 5, 5 days a week, and go to the office. Like, it's a structure that's been put in there for hundreds of years that we never really questioned, or it has not evolved as the world has evolved. And what COVID has done is just accelerating the need to do the changes. And some of them are changes that should have been done long time ago. And the same is for the business strategy and engagement with the companies. I think when things are going smooth, when the revenue is coming in, when the relationship are the way that they are, and life is business as normal, then that leaves very little space to think about strategy, revitalizing your brand, revitalizing your image. But when COVID hits, it really forced everyone to just take a step back, small companies and big companies alike, take a step back and think of their overall strategy, of their purpose, of their value, and a lot of the things that I don't think many companies think about on a day-to-day basis. You think about your operations, you think about your challenges, you think about your numbers, you think about your pipeline, but you really don't think about the big things that make a business what it is, that is really serving the people and serving the market in the way that it is. So what COVID has brought forward is just the need, accelerating the need for that, and forcing each and everyone to take time to reconsider and rethink their strategies. The first part was about the external landscape, and I know when we chatted about this a little bit, and I think it's very, very true in a country like the UAE, where it's mainly a lot of expat community. And I'm sure each of us knows someone who's left the country or is moving back home or is going to a different place, and that is a reality of businesses, and especially B2C, but also B2B. That many of the relationships that you have as a company in these companies, maybe for years, they've now changed. People have left, people have changed their jobs, or these companies have taken on restructuring of some way or another, maybe to cut costs, maybe to achieve other synergies. But really the landscape of the relationship that's been built, a lot of them has been changed and are changing, and just keeping up with that sometimes can be a struggle. So something as simple as the person who's the focal point for you, or that advocate within a business that we use to advocate for your business, leaving, or being impacted by what's happening, or their company restructuring and them taking another role, that's a real challenge. And just keeping tabs on that, understanding what's happening in them, and just having conversations at different levels. And that is something that many businesses have, right? You might have only one focal point inside a company, and that's the only person and relationship has been going well. And I think businesses that have had that sort of relationships are really impacted right now because of that change in landscape that happens. So I think that brings the concept of the breadth and depth of relationships that you have inside your clients. So do you have I mean, of course you will have one focal point or two focal points, but you need to have some sort of access, some sort of knowledge and awareness, understanding the influencers within those companies, so that if your focal point is not there, someone still knows you, someone would still advocate for using your services or using your company. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges, where you have many of the businesses relying on one link only, and then that link fails. So this is the first one. And again, that should be done COVID or no COVID, but COVID has brought forward the need to rechange and really think about the breadth and depth, not only the depth, but the breadth and depth of the relationship inside the companies, and how can you always keep them up to date. Understanding the influencers and the decision makers, procurement, finance, HR, a lot of the functions that are not really main buyers, but are very important stakeholders in those relationships. So that is one thing that I would say many businesses are thinking about and should be thinking about, is how, in order to survive, grow the relationship, you start to think about your influencers.
I think it's quite an important point to make. You mentioned, I guess there are lots of companies that are exposed to this risk, and the risk being is there just one touch point within that organization, and that touch point may be the one person your company interacts with, but that also may be the one account manager within your organization, because if your account manager leaves, then also by virtue of them leaving, your relationship is then severed, arguably. So having that breadth, I think, is critical. It was interesting. One thing that came up, and this was a conversation a few months ago, where one of our clients was saying that they were struggling now to get hold of the new business element of their pipeline, because they only had office numbers. they didn't have the mobile numbers of the people. And now obviously with people no longer working in the office, they suddenly couldn't get hold of a large portion of their pipeline, which I thought was incredible. Not necessarily short-sighted, it wouldn't be so critical, but the reality is it's just something that can perhaps easily be overlooked, that this period has just highlighted. And like you said, so building that depth and breadth minimizes that risk. So I think it's a fantastic point that I think perhaps many people don't even understand exactly, but I think you just explained it, very well, in that there's the risk in not having that, but then also the value in having those many touch points and those many points of association means you will inevitably build a much better picture of a client. But then also you will be viewed by the client as more of a partner rather than a simple one-touch service provider, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and to your point, yes, having one touch point from a business to the other businesses as well. And whenever I always talk to, especially startups that are growing, I always tell them, right, as a founder, you should never lose touch with your customers, because at some point you're taking care of the customers yourself, then you grow, then you have account managers who are handling the relationships, and then suddenly you're in the back office taking a look at Excel sheets and numbers and checks and corporate thingies, as opposed to having the relationship with the customer. So I think keeping that touch with the customers at all levels, it could be less frequent, right? It could be every 1 year, it could be every 3 months, right? Yeah. If you're a CEO or a senior sales manager. But keeping the touch with the end customer at some point is not to doubt the account managers, but it's really to safeguard and deepen the relationship. And that, I think it also prevents, we see a lot of things where you have one account manager leaving from company A to competitor B, and then all the accounts, all of a sudden, they leave with that account manager. So you lose those customers because you did not invest in developing different touch points with them as well.
But I think also I think it extends beyond the transactional side of the relationship as well, right? So I've worked in service providers in the past whereby, yes, you have that kind of sales relationship. You're an account manager on one side, you deal with an account manager on the other side. But the reality is, perhaps the CEOs, where practical, of course, should have their own relationship. The marketing departments perhaps should have their own relationship that are perhaps independent of the client service provider relationship, so that everything can be fed back. Because what has become obvious in my own experience is, yes, it's certainly a requirement, and I'd certainly advocate having multiple points of data gathering, let's say, but there is still the need from a sales perspective to have one consolidated account manager, let's say. So although I think we're appreciating the two different worlds, right? There needs to be one consolidated approach, so the client is always clear on who to go to get answers from a service provider point of view. But then the other touch points come from just having two companies working together rather than two individuals, right?
Absolutely. Excellent.
What just put it to the audience in a way, I guess. What's your biggest insight from that, guys? Does anybody listening have any different view, or have you experienced frustrations or challenges with single entry touch points with your clients? Just while we wait for some insights to come through, Heba, to one of the other points you mentioned in this particular strategy, this is obviously about remaining relevant to our clients as well, right? What is your view on this? Like, how does all this keep us relevant?
Yeah, I think the second one is relevance, and by relevance, and really a question. You did share with me one of the comments that someone was saying earlier, is that why are clients not picking up my calls, or say, I'm not doing my numbers, we're not doing the numbers because the clients are too busy to talk to us, yeah, or we cannot get a meeting scheduled with a client. That is definitely an indication of bigger issue, right? So if people at this critical time, again, COVID has really aggravated and has really made come to the surface a lot of the issues in a lot of the relationships and a lot of the commercial relationships that's happening with customers. So if the customers do not think that you are relevant to where they are now, the challenges that they're having, or what keeps them up at night, as I like to put it as a marketer. So what keeps my customers up at night? If they're not picking up your calls, then you are not seen as someone who can solve one of their problems, because COVID has forced everyone to prioritize everything, prioritize their time, prioritize their spending, prioritize the project that they're going to take, prioritize the problems that they're going to solve. So, if you ask me as a person, right, one of my problems in January, they're definitely much, much different than my problem now, as in August or in September in terms of COVID. So companies are the same, and if they're not picking up your calls, then you are not a priority. You have not succeeded in making your offerings, your solutions, your whatever that you're selling as a company, as a service or a product, relevant to them, or one of the things that solves their problem. And that could mean so many things. That could mean that you did not invest in building that relationship before. So right now is just an indication of that relationship not being built, because again, people have to prioritize. If you have to prioritize, it really shows you where you are really standing in terms of their priorities, in terms of their importances. And second, it could mean that you're not putting together the right offerings or the right solutions to them. So you're still trying to sell whatever sold pre-COVID. You're still stuck in the past where one of your offerings was doing really well, and you don't understand why it's not doing so well, or why people are not interested in it. The third, it could be you're doing both A and B, so you have the right relationship, you are pushing the right products and services that are relevant to where they are, but you're not doing the right value proposition. So you're trying to sell something that is seen as, you're trying to sell a benefit that is now a luxury. You're trying to sell a benefit, you're trying to sell innovation, which is something, digital transformation, which something sounded really, really good pre-COVID-19, but maybe now this is the project that sounds like a priority. Like, people would put their limited time and staff and challenge while working from home. Maybe they're just really concerned about getting their infrastructure still up and running. Maybe they're still concerned about their own revenue stream. So you're not using the right benefits. You're not pushing the right lever when it comes to the value proposition that your solution or your product is bringing. So could be one of three problems, or could be all three together. But I think it's a very good indication, and understanding why this is happening is really, really key. And the fourth thing I could think of is they're just not the right customers. And this is something that Gary Vee, the marketing influencer, always talks about, and it's like, if your customers are not buying from you, you're just pushing and pushing and pushing. They're just maybe not the right customers. Maybe you need to evaluate your targeting strategy and your account strategy to understand, maybe it used to be telco, but whoever needs that solution today is retail, is not telco, or something is just not happening correctly. And sometimes understanding the problem is extremely difficult. It will take a lot of work to understand. Talk to your current customers, the one who still talk to you, the one who still pick up your calls, and ask them, like, what are we helping you solve? Why are you so keen in this project? Or just try to have a conversation one way or another, and that will help you get insights on what is it that's working. And in the other times around, just you try to understand, what is it? Are you pushing the wrong products? Are you just pushing it the wrong way? Is it the wrong person? Is it the wrong buyer? Again, we're talking about people's roles changing. So maybe something that used to be an IT task is not considered a business task. So maybe, for example, e-commerce used to be something led by the IT function, and now e-commerce is being pushed to the marketing, or it's being pushed to the sales and revenue, because it's one of the platforms and it's their best interest. It's one of the challenges to take an e-commerce and ramp up e-commerce to still make their numbers in terms of COVID-19 and the challenges that are posed by it. So really understanding what's happening is key. definitely not pushing more is the answer. If there's an answer to that, it's definitely not doing it harder, doing it more, spending more marketing dollars, another marketing campaign. All sorts of these solutions will be cosmetics. If one of these issues is persistent, not resolving these issues and just trying to push more marketing or blaming it on the market, because people are spending. It's just that priorities have changed dramatically, and just understanding where their priorities have changed and where they're spending, and just aligning yourself to this is going to really determine who is going to survive or not in terms of the COVID-19.
I think it's really interesting, the point you mentioned about problems, and this I think answers Tarek's question. I'll just read it out so we can cover it as well. So Tarek has said, recruiting new customers and keeping existing customers healthy needs more efforts. How to manage it and the best way to reach the right goal for both. I think, look, when it comes to both managing existing customers and attracting new ones, it really starts with what Heba was just discussing, and that is regarding well, two things really regarding problems. One, understanding what problems the client has. That can only be uncovered through questioning techniques. But also sometimes I think, and this is part of the training I give for the Dubai Chamber when they have their Dubai Startup Program. Now, solving a problem in itself is not enough, because if the problem that we're solving is not one of the top two, let's say, it's not a priority, as you've quite rightly highlighted. And I think the commercial parts of some businesses, they miss this sometimes. They see that they're still solving a problem. They bang on about the problem that they solve with their technology or their solution or their service, but they haven't investigated what are the other problems that a customer has that I'm perhaps not aware of. And until we have those conversations, we're not able to determine, are they the right customer? Like you've quite rightly mentioned, that it may be that, because of the new world we're in now, customer requirements evolve, our delivery models and services evolve, and those two may not always match. It may be, like you say, we outgrow some customers outgrow us, we head in different directions. But until we're able to engage with our customers or our clients on a level that enables us to uncover the true problems and how they're impacting the business, like you mentioned earlier on, they're not going to pick up the phone to us. They give us an opportunity to learn from them. If we're not asking the questions and taking that back, then how can we serve them, right?
Yeah, and one thing I want to add as well, Richard. So, going back to your example, I'm picking on you because, I can see you and we're talking. You said, you're doing this webinar series. I know you put a lot of effort into it. So we talked multiple times. I see how deeply you prepare for them, for the content, and you're doing this as a business to offer something of value to your customers and help them through that COVID-19 crisis as well. I think every business needs to ask itself, when was the last time I provided something of value to my customers without asking for something in return? And it's a very big dilemma, because we always expect that the relationships are like two-way. You give me your money, I give you my products and services. And sometimes it's especially at times like now, people do appreciate you taking the time and effort, and that could be very challenging because you are already impacted and you're already struggling, and you're already, not you, but businesses in general, really trying to go through and really understand their strategy, understand, their offerings, catch up with what's happening, operate and work remotely. So adding a little bit of a layer on top of that can sound very challenging, but it could make all the difference. And once I read that if you're, how many LinkedIn cold emails you get, trying to sell and offer you something, and how often do you respond to these? You don't. But for example, if someone is asking you to, you're saying you're working on a white paper, and you're asking for people to send them that white paper, they're definitely much more inclined to have a discussion with you. They're definitely much more inclined to be part of a webinar like this and, you know, ask you questions and come back to you and, you know, establish that sort of relationship. So giving things of value, and that value can be so many things. And it doesn't even need to have any monetary value. So for example, you know, one of the things that I think B2B businesses, and I'm talking B2B because I know the majority of attendees today are coming from, you know, the IT B2B world, should learn from B2B is loyalty and the creation of loyalty programs. And how do you build a community of professionals that are, you know, part of your group that you're building, and how can you avail that? And so many businesses have this. You already have focals and you have contacts with people that are very, you know, peers, and they already have peers in the industry, and their peers are your new customers that they can help you grow in. And I don't see many businesses taking advantage of that, or creating things like community clubs, professional clubs, bringing together their users who are very happy and they're very loyal, bringing them together and offering something of value, offering them insights, offering them, you know, putting together, you know, I would say a face-to-face event, but maybe even now a virtual event or webinar series or something that's seen of value to them, and adding to their growth professionally as well, not only in their businesses or for the growth of their business, but for them professionally. I don't see many businesses doing that, and I can tell you it's something of huge success. And I can tell you one example that I've done when I was marketing leader for one of the marketing solutions at IBM. So IBM used to have a series of its own marketing, where mainly we are trying to sell solutions for marketing automation to marketers. And one of the challenges that I identified at the time was the skills, because you are talking about people who are working in marketing, and all of a sudden their profession is transforming. They are being told that AI, you need to adopt AI in marketing, you need to adopt ad tech, which is advertising technology. The landscape of IT and marketing is changing dramatically, and no one is preparing them for that change in their profession, and they're really struggling to grasp it and embrace it and grow within that environment. And one of the things that ideas that I came up with was to hold something called a marketing masterclass, where IBM is not doing any selling. We're not pitching products. We're just telling the marketers what is happening in the industry. What can AI do for them? What are some of the use cases? How can they think differently about their marketing? And the feedback has been immense. We literally had people queuing to you know, be part of the event and enter the event. That would not have been the case if that was an event trying to sell or pitch a product or service. And you know, the customers really valued it, and marketers really valued it, and they viewed us as a subject matter experts, you know, people who know what they're talking about. They're not just pushing solutions or products down the line in the market. So I think in the middle of all of this, and in the middle of the challenge of trying to bring up the numbers, we forget about the importance of providing something of value. And providing something of value could be a consultation, could be just calling the customers and saying, you know, I have this expert who, for example, digital transformation, and you know, they'll come and sit with you for half a day, and they will do a workshop with you. You can maybe design thinking workshop or something of the sort, to understand what are the challenges that, you know, are happening, and how can we help you, and you know, what can you do. And it doesn't need to be all that you have to buy XYZ, right? It could be best practices. If you have those subject matter experts, it could be best practices that you see in other customers, you know. So I see customer XYZ, you don't have to name them, of course, if it's a confidential thing, but here's what some customers are doing. Here is what we see happening in the market. Here is how you can capture this opportunity. And that they will have time for this. They will have time to welcome you into their world. They will have time to share their challenges. They will have time to talk to you and tell you what they're going through and how you can help them. And you know, voila, right? You have time when they're answering
the key value for both relationships is right there. It's being allowed to uncover those challenges, because unless we understand the challenges that are, you know, that the people in our market are facing, how can we possibly serve anyone, right? But sometimes people don't, we haven't earned the right to uncover those challenges because we haven't invested anything in the relationship. And like you say, the value up front is absolutely key. You know, I used to work for a company here called Dubizzle. You may have heard of it, a little classified platform. And one of the things we constantly tried to create within the property and the autos division specifically was stickiness. Because in recognition of sometimes, you know, the market gets tough, especially in real estate, especially in the auto resale market. There needed to be value beyond the transactional side of business, right? So we started offering data points to help them run their business, different tools like call tracking, this kind of stuff. Essentially, these are all value adds, a lot of which were free bolt-ons. But the point they're making is it's stickiness, and it's keeping them loyal out of necessity to some extent, because it gets to a point whereby they can't operate their business without that lifeline. Does that make sense? So beyond the transactional side of the relationship, there's value inherent in that relationship. And I think if we can all start to engage with our clients or potential clients and really try better to understand them, we'll have a better chance of setting our own business up for success. Because unless we're solving, as you pointed out a little while ago, unless we're solving a problem that is high enough on our prospects priority list, we can't possibly expect to one, win their business, or two, retain their business if they're up for renewal. Like one of the people who, one of our prospects actually, Sujesh, he made a comment yesterday. He said, we have plenty of orders from new and existing clients, but they can't deliver to their clients because of supply chain disruption. How can his question was, how can we keep a client holding on without delivering? And then the reality is, for this particular product line, the reality is the whole market's disrupted. So it's not that he can, it's not that the customers can get the supply from elsewhere, but he's obviously very nervous about this relationship, because temporarily his delivery his ability to deliver is suspended, and that's obviously putting pressure on the relationship, because he needs them to stay with them. And this is the time when, you know, understanding those problems and investing in multiple layers will serve his business, because it will mean that if the customers were to go elsewhere, they'd be losing not just the product or the service, but everything else that goes with it, right?
Yeah, and to that question, Richard, I think transparency is really key, right? So not a lot of companies are doing that, and just really saying openly what is the impact. When can they foresee that this will be not an issue, and when it will be resolved, and when can the customer expect their shipment, and then compensation, and really making sure that your customer is happy. And some of the greatest brands in the world, I mean, Amazon, for example, are successful because of that. They do not think about the short-term revenue. They, if you're not happy with the product, they will take it back. You might say that yes, they can afford it because they're Amazon, but I would say they're Amazon because they do that. And Amazon because that if you order from them and you're not happy, that you get your money back, or they will compensate you one way or another. So in case that there is a disruption like this, and it's just transparency, the first thing is very important, because sometimes it's not about the money. Sometimes it's about the customer needs to know when, because they need to plan accordingly. So it's not, if you tell them it's in a week, they will do arrangements, but if you tell them it's going to take a month, then they will do other arrangements, and they will plan their business around when do they expect the product or the service to be available to them. So transparency sometimes is more valuable to them than the money they have spent to acquire the good or the service. And definitely compensation afterwards. How can you compensate them for their patience throughout, and how they're going to continue that relationship one way or another. And it might be sometimes taking a hit for something that you're not responsible for, but if that's a price to retaining the customer on the long term, definitely it's definitely one of the things that I think we don't do so well in most cases is the concept. So Our existing customers, we have them. The customers vote with their dollars, so that's a reality, and we know that customers do vote with their dollars. So if they choose to stay with you, invest with you, probably they're happy with your product or service. The problem with that concept and not doing proper measures to measure the real customer experience, whether that's NPS or whether that's other metrics, and I'll use IBM as an example. So NPS is one of the most important metrics for us in IBM to measure the customer satisfaction and the customer experience with our products and services, and the experience they've had buying and procuring from us. If you don't have like a proper measure of customer experience and customer satisfaction and counting on the dollars coming in and the renewals and so on, is that it might be a very short while before your customers find someone else who can do what you do better or cheaper, and then they will not be there anymore. They will just really move, and that's what I think a lot of businesses are seeing now, and they're seeing the drop and they're seeing customers shift because they were counting on the dollars coming in, on renewing the contracts, but they did not really understand or did not really know what the customer experience was like with their products and services. So I cannot stress this enough as maybe #1 strategy, I would say, if you're talking about your existing customer, understanding their experience from their point of view. And there's so many metrics and ways to do it. You can choose to do something very simple as NPS. You can do something very elaborate as design thinking and talking to them and surveying them and understanding what are their pain points. How can you make it easy for them and easier for them to do business with you? If they would do one thing differently, what would they do, and all of that. And I don't know if it's again a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of investment in thinking about it. And here one more metric to think about, one more thing to think about is it's not only are my customers buying from me, but are they happily buying from me, or are they buying from me but they're looking for someone else meanwhile, or they're buying from me but if tomorrow someone does what I do cheaper, they will just move. So I think
we've got a saying in the company that I used to work with that was if someone buys from you based on costs, they'll leave you based on costs. So implied in that is the value proposition, right? It's understanding internally what our value is, but then also are we conveying that value to our customers so they understand, so they don't make a decision based purely on margins. Although the margins are obviously being squeezed at this time, we need to now, perhaps more importantly than ever, is to convey the value, the intrinsic and extrinsic value that our relationship delivers for our customers.
I mean, absolutely. And so the value, and yes, the customer experience is important, because then again, you can compete on cost or not, but customers, I mean, I was just reading a survey, it's like basically 80% of customers will pay more for a product or a service if the customer experience is superior. If they have a challenge, someone is going to talk to them about it, someone is going to solve their problem, they're going to be, it's an easy and smooth experience procuring the products and so on. But I'm not saying it happen 100% of the times, but again, it's super important to understand their experience. Even if you're competing on a cost level, just understanding their experience and how you can improve within the parameters of the cost that you have to bear.
Yeah, no, Asif has written a question. So he said that as this period of uncertainty extends towards the end of 2020, more and more contracts for existing clients that is are obviously coming up for renewal. Cost sensitivity is putting even the most loyal customer accounts at risk. How do we convey our value in order to safeguard renewals? I think it's a good question. We've covered most of it already, I believe, but I think the key thing here is it's not as obvious as one statement or one email that says, here is our value. The reality is a lot of it comes from the experience of the product or service that they receive, but the experience as far as the relationship goes as well, I think, because if a client feels that they're being heard, feels that they're being understood, that their problems are being addressed in a proper manner, then that in itself will inspire loyalty, or at least you stand a higher degree of retaining those accounts when obviously they're at flight risk. Because I think that, especially for a lot of vendors now, there's a lot of contracts that are up for renewal during this. As this period extends, you know, we're already 6 months. If it extends to 12 months, then potentially that's all of your clients, if they're on 12-month contracts, will at some point be asking, am I with the right partner? So it's an important mindset that we need to get to grasp in the conversations we have with clients. A renewal conversation shouldn't take place once a year. A renewal conversation really is an ongoing dialogue with a client. The renewal is more a formality of a contract signing more than anything, I think.
100%. And if you leave a renewal conversation up to the month or the month before it's renewed, then the risk is extreme. You know, and then that's the concept of customer success, right? So understanding, you know, is the customer using the products or service? Because I would argue if it's not that important to them, if they're not using it, if it's not of value to them, or if we have failed in making it essential to them and making sure that they're using and they're getting the best value of money for the product or the service, then I would even argue if it's ethical to try to push a product or service upon a customer that is struggling with cash if they're not seeing the value. So the homework, to your point, is done before, and the homework is ensuring the customer success, right? And you maybe don't have a customer success manager, like which I highly recommend, right? That if you're in that sort of business and you have renewals, having someone whose job is to ensure that the customer is happy with the product, using the product, getting the benefit of it, and talking about it, right? So the customer life cycle value, you know, if your customer is advocating for the product, they're talking about it, you want all your customers to be that. And you want to ensure, because they are at this level, if you've done that job, then they're not going to think about renewing the contract. It will become a priority to them and their business because they're getting the value out of it. But if they're not getting the value out of it, I mean, you can try all sorts of tactics. You can try flexibility around the payment terms. You know, flexibility is going to be really important. So if that's like a, maybe, you know, your business model, again, back to your business model, you know, can you do like a monthly payments? Can you do biannual payments? Can you do some sort of a model by consumption, for example? So you know what, you don't have to charge if it's a license. I'll change the way the licensing works. It's, you know, per user, or it's per hours, or it's per whatever it is. So a lot of flexibility will need to be there. But the most important thing, to your point, is the value to them. If the value is clear and present, that conversation will not even happen. But only if that work was not done throughout the customer use of the product, then that becomes a challenge.
It was Hans actually mentioned last night that the focus for his organization is increasing the share of wallet from existing customers rather than spending time in pursuit of new ones. And that really is recognition of a true, if you like, customer success mindset. It's recognition that the growth of their revenue is from the existing pool of clients. So it's a move away from a sales perspective. It's a move away from this, I guess, if you like, a kind of traditional funnel where you've got obviously a lot of activity that happens initially with the marketing and the business development, and it all filters down to the point of close, and then they become a client and then perhaps left to some extent. Whereas with customer success, you have this almost like an hourglass shape where there's obviously a lot of activity up front with marketing outreach, brand differentiation. Once the client is on board, the close and the sale is actually only a very, very small part, but then the funnel opens back up again in recognition of the fact that there's inherently a lot of work that's involved then in that relationship, because client, it's a relationship, right? It's a client that you've won hopefully for life, or as long as you're both in the same business, not just to pick up checks once a year, which can often be the case, especially with younger companies that are just breaking into new territory and they're in this high growth business acquisitions phase, right?
Yeah, and you know, to your point about the smaller businesses, right? So this has been the growth, right? Everyone in the smaller businesses, if you are in a venture capitalism or if you're raising funds, I think the culture was instilled by, you know, that sort of mindset in terms of growth. So how many active users do you have, and how are you growing those active users, and growing, which mainly about the number of new users and you know, downloads, app downloads if you're in the app business and all that. And that culture has been there for a while, and I think a lot of companies are really realizing how difficult it is to diversify and, you know, gain newer customers always, and be on that growth mode of like new customers all the time. Like, you need to have it because you will have attrition. This is part of life. You will definitely have attrition to your active base, so you have to always keep an eye out on your new customers and, you know, growing them and getting new ones and so on. But what are you doing with the existing ones, the ones you already won their trust and their experience? And even for marketing, you know, it used to be the funnel, as you said, right? So marketing finishes and ends when the customer signs the deal. But the real work that's happening now, and a lot of companies are seeing the value of account-based marketing, you know, life cycle marketing. So how can we grow long-term growth of these accounts in terms of the revenue, but also the number of products that they're using, or the number of services that they're using. And the more you have footprint, the more it becomes difficult for another supplier to just, you know, take you out from the account. So I think the mindset, the shift is happening, and I think a lot of people and a lot of businesses are realizing that the hope and the wanting, you know, to always hunt after new customers, white space, right? And hearing this word a lot is important, but maybe it's not as important as, you know, the gold mine that you already have, which is your existing customers, and just knowing that you've done everything that you can to build, grow, and nurture those relationships.
Definitely. I think it's really important. What's become obvious to me over the last, I guess, 10 years in my own career is that whilst with a lot of, certainly a lot of younger companies, you have departments that grow in silos. So for example, sales in one department, product in another, marketing in another. And the reality is, until these departments interact together and they work as a team, you're always going to face these challenges, especially with customer success cannot exist unless there is cohesion between marketing and sales, recognition, mutual respect from those departments, which is often they're loggerheads, but then also the kind of product side of the mix as well, which is why I believe one of the most important roles for companies these days is a commercial director. So that would be someone who takes overall responsibility for marketing, sales, and product. And the reason that that's so important is because obviously the marketing is there to provide the you know, to fill the pipeline and build differentiation in the market. The sales are they're obviously, because they're the front guys to manage the relationship. They in turn feed information back to the product team that then relays that to the marketing team that provides differentiation and information to the market. And it's a whole cycle. But unless those three departments work cohesively together, there's a limit to which there's a limit to the amount of growth that any company can sustain. And I think as we move through this period, it's even more important that those departments work cohesively together.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I would add as well, Richard, is definitely the metrics and the KPIs. So it used to be, and it still is in many companies, that all the metrics for growth are on the new customers, right? So marketing, you know, measured on the new leads, measured on the new pipeline, measured on the fresh pipeline, and all these things. Sales as well, right? Very focused on new customers, new signings, and the metrics not really addressed to target existing customers. And you know, we can talk as much as we want about the importance of existing customers, importance of renewals, growing, propensity to buy, cross-sell, upsell. Sounds really good on paper, but unless their teams and the people on the ground are incentivized and are measured based on these metrics, they're just not going to happen, because no one is going to spend their time. If all your target as a salesperson or as a commercial director is in the new pipeline that you're bringing in, or the new customers, the new logos, this and that, you're not going to pay any attention to your existing customers, and it just ends up being everyone's job but nobody's job. So we always see that, right? So our existing customers are very important to us, but okay, who is being paid to keep them and grow them and make them successful? No one. Or maybe it's only or maybe it's only, you know, some brand manager who's responsible for the brand, but the people on the ground, you know, they have their own challenges. And then it becomes this exercise of, yeah, it's important, but we're not doing it because we're not being paid to do it. So I cannot stress enough, I think, really looking at the metrics and the way that it's nobody's fault really, but the way many organizations, not only in the region but worldwide, small and big, the measurements and the metrics are all geared towards new customers and gaining new customers, and that's really impacted a lot of businesses.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. You know, the more we talk about it, the more I think actually customer success is a webinar in itself, because there's so much detail to get into there. So I think I'll add that to the roster in the coming weeks for sure. No, before we close up, I just want to obviously just sum up in a way, Heba, because there's quite a lot we've covered today. So if we just quickly recap, so the 3 strategies that we've kind of jumped in and out of. One was surveying the external landscape to get close to your clients. The second was to assess internal strategies and value perception, and the third was to update marketing tactics to accommodate smaller budget, which we haven't done too much in. But just to sum up, what would you say is a key takeaway for each one of those? So the first one regarding the surveying the external landscape, what would you say a key takeaway for that would be?
I would say put on paper your relationships with each and every important client and existing client to you. Put on paper what are the relationships that you have now and what kind of relationships you want to have in the future. Put are the key roles, the buyers, the influencers, the gatekeepers, and really assess it. And only when you put it in paper, you will be able to see the real depth of your presence in these accounts, and, you know, build a plan to how do we, you know, if we have a very not a very good relationship with procurement, you know, and we want down the line 2-3 months to have that strong relationship, you know, moving from the red, from the yellow to green, how are we going to do that? Maybe we can engage our own procurement manager, you know, build an event for procurement managers and bring them together in a webinar to discuss the latest and greatest in procurement metrics, and just build that relationship, or put someone on the relationship, you know, and understand what they're going through, understand their point of view, and so on. So put it on paper. Very important insights will come out of that, and map for the future and build a plan. The second, existing customers, their priorities, talk to them, talk to the ones who are talking to you, ask them why they're talking to you, and the ones who are not talking to you, try different ways to attract them differently, and really try to assess. Some of them will talk to you, some of you will tell you one way or another. If you offer something of value, if you offer a consultation, if you offer a subject matter expert to do something for them free of charge, they will talk to you, and just really take it as an opportunity to listen, not push, but really listen to what's happening and what is top on their mind. You can align to that. So do talk to them and gather insights. And the third, marketing on a budget. I think we touched on it, but not really. So marketing on a budget is definitely about value. It's about strong content, about value add. It's about showing relevance to each and every customer and respect to what they're going through inside their organizations, versus pushing things. And that should be business as usual. That should not be COVID-specific tactics. Great marketing is about, you know, understanding the customer need and aligning to it, and that's what should be done. So do offer things of value. Do not just spend all your money, your marketing dollars. Maybe it's not best spent on advertising. Maybe it's spent on creating a design thinking workshop for your customer where they can, you know, unleash their challenges and solve their own issues, and they will see that of great value. So challenge yourself with marketing spending. It's not about spending more, it's about how.
Yeah, but I think when people think about spending money on marketing, they envisage advertising, irrespective of the medium. But like you said, there's so much more to marketing than spending money on advertising. It's really that the investment in engagement, right? There obviously there's a cost to that, because that's the time taken off perhaps other tasks. But the reality is that investment of time is almost immeasurable, the amount of return you'll get from it. So look, I think that's all we have time for today. So Heba, thank you so much for joining us. I really enjoyed the discussion. I think there's been many things that we can hold a host of other webinars on, including customer success, as I've said. But look, so that's all we've got time for today, guys. If you'd like to get a copy of the white paper I mentioned earlier on the call, just type in white paper into the chat box, and I'll have one of my team reach out to you when the paper is prepared. Also, if you'd like to arrange an informal conversation about becoming part of the mastermind community I mentioned, again, just type the word mastermind into the chat box, and I'll personally reach out to you in the next couple of days to take that conversation forward. So that's it, Heba. I just want to say thank you again. And is there anything else you want to add?
Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you for everyone who did attend. Do connect with me on LinkedIn, and yeah, I would love to hear your insights as well.
Great. Thanks a lot, Heba. Have a great day. See you all soon, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.